What if the person you despise most was actually your only family? Sophia was just a nurse trying to survive until she accepted a job at a sick millionaire's mansion. But something was wrong. His wife seemed more interested in the inheritance than her husband's health, and then an unexpected request changed everything. Pretend to be my daughter for a day. What began as a hoax soon revealed a secret buried for years. Betrayals, conspiracies, and a will that could cost a life. But when the truth came out, Sophia realized that fate was about to turn the tide in a way that no one expected. Just out of curiosity, if I ignore this pile of bills, will they disappear? Sophia stared at the invoices spread out on the kitchen table as if she could solve the problem with just the strength of her thoughts. Silence was the only answer. No, I already imagined it. She sighed, crossing her arms. Her health had been terrible in recent weeks, and she didn't even have money for an appointment. The rent was late, the pantry was almost empty. If he didn't get a job soon, his only option would be to start negotiating with fate, or with the gossipy neighbor who would love to pay to listen to his dramas. It was then that the phone rang. Unknown number. She narrowed her eyes. Telemarketing? Scam. A collector using another line. If you're going to offer a credit card, I'll accept it, but only if it comes with an infinite limit. Good afternoon, a female voice responded, dry and direct. My name is Olivia. I am in need of a nurse. Your name was recommended. Sophia blinked. Oh, really? Yes. Can you come in today for an interview? Today? Like now? Yes. Or would you prefer that I wait for a sign from the heavens? Sophia frowned. The woman was practical and impatient, but deep down, she was in no position to refuse. I can be there in an hour. Great, I'll send you the address. The call ended before Sophia could ask for more details. She looked at her cell phone. That was weird. But money is money. Olivia's mansion was huge, the kind that looked like it belonged to millionaires or soap opera villains. As soon as she knocked on the door, a maid opened it and guided her to an elegant office. Olivia was sitting behind an imposing desk with a calculating look in her eyes. Her impeccable blonde hair and expensive suit made it look like she had never sweated a day in her life. Are you Sophia? Last time I checked, yes. Olivia intertwined their fingers. Do you have experience caring for terminally ill patients? Sophia hesitated. I've taken care of patients in serious conditions, yes. But I didn't know that would be the case. Marco, my husband, has been diagnosed with a rare disease. Doctors say he has just a few months to live. Olivia's tone carried no emotion. It was as if he were talking about the weather or a cancelled dinner. Sophia felt a shiver. This must be very difficult for you. Doctors exaggerate. It's not that serious. Sophia raised her eyebrows. Then why do you need a nurse? Precaution. The answer was vague, but Sophia let it go. Before he could ask any more questions, a man in a dirt-stained apron entered the office. Sorry, I thought, you don't have eyes? Olivia turned to him with a withering look. Get out of here now. The gardener lowered his head. Pardon me, Mistress Olivia. Sophia felt uncomfortable in the way he was treated, but before he could say anything, Olivia stood up. Let's go see Marco. Sophia followed her through the mansion. Upon entering the room, he immediately felt that something was wrong. Marco was lying in bed, pale and sweating, his breathing weak and irregular. Is he? Sophia approached, noticing the man's chest rising and falling erratically. He's suffocating. She acted instinctively, adjusting her position and giving light chest compressions to help him breathe. Marco coughed violently, choking before finally catching his breath. That was close. He muttered with a tired smile. You have hands like an angel. Sophia held his hand for a moment, relieved. It was just a reflex, but you need to be more careful. On the other side of the room, Olivia just watched, impassive. "Good job," he said without any emotion. "But I don't think we need someone full-time." Marco, however, raised his voice. "I want her to be my nurse." Olivia crossed her arms. "March! I still have a voice in this house, Olivia." He looked at Sophia. "Stay." Sophia nodded. "If I stay, I want to take care of this properly. I need a room to monitor your condition closely." Marco smiled weakly. "Stay in the best guest suite." Olivia sighed, clearly upset. "As you wish." As Sophia looked at Marco, she felt that something about the man went beyond illness. Something was wrong in that house, and she would find out what. Sophia smelled the woodsy smell of the furniture as she walked through the halls of the mansion. It was strange how that place, so luxurious, seemed cold and empty. The maid guided her to a spacious room overlooking the gardens. "This will be your room." Sophia looked around. The bed looked comfortable, the furniture was impeccable, and the bathroom even had a marble bathtub. "Well, at least I'll die in style if that woman decides to throw me out the window." The maid raised an eyebrow and Sophia smiled. "Just kidding, I guess." Before he could continue exploring the room, he heard a clearing of his throat at the door. He turned around and found Marco leaning against the doorframe, visibly tired, but with a light smile. "Are you comfortable yet? Well, considering my apartment has more leaks than furniture, I guess I can get used to it." Marco laughed, but soon coughed, putting his hand to his chest. Sophia quickly approached, holding his arm to help him sit in the armchair next to the window. "Are you well?" "I'm just a little out of breath. It happens often. I should be getting more care." Marco glanced at the door, as if making sure no one was listening. "That's why I asked you to stay. You're the only one who really seems to care." Sophia felt a tightness in her chest. How could someone so rich be so alone? "If you need anything, let me know. In fact, if you want to get away from here, I'll drive." "I'll consider that offer." The next morning, Sophia was organizing Marco's medicines when Olivia entered the room with a lawyer at her side. "Marco, we need to resolve this today." "Solve what?" Sophia asked, looking at the papers the lawyer was holding. "My will," Marco replied with a hard look at Olivia. "Yes, everything is ready." Olivia pushed the papers towards him. "You just need to sign it." Sophia watched Marco pick up the pen. Something felt wrong. "Have you read everything yet?" "No need to worry, Sophia," Olivia cut in. "This is a family matter." Marco hesitated, looking at Sophia. "Can you give us a moment alone?" Sophia didn't want to leave, but she nodded. As soon as he closed the door behind him, he leaned against the wall and sighed. Something about that woman bothered her deeply. Minutes later, Marco called Sophia back to the room. He was holding the papers, but hadn't signed anything yet. "I need to ask you a favor. If I'm going to steal these documents and run away, I'm in." Marco laughed. "Not quite." He took a deep breath before continuing. "I need you to pretend to be my daughter for a day." Silence filled the space between them. "Sorry, I think I heard wrong." "Didn't hear." "Ah, so you've gone crazy. Okay. I just need you to do this for one day." Sophia crossed her arms, waiting for an explanation. "There's something in these documents I don't want to sign. And if I have a daughter, well, that changes everything." Sophia blinked a few times, trying to process. "So you want me to be your daughter to stop Olivia from stealing from you?" "Basically." Sophia shook her head. "That might be the most absurd thing I've ever been asked to do." Marco smiled. "But will you do it?" Sophia sighed. "Given your history of bad decisions, I should say no. But for some reason, I can't." "So we have a deal?" Sophia took the documents from his hands. "You owe me one." Marco smiled, but before he could say anything, the bedroom door opened abruptly. Olivia entered, with the lawyer behind. "Time to sign, Marco." Sophia felt a shiver. Something was about to happen. Sophia kept her arms crossed as Olivia walked across the room, her heels clicking on the wooden floor. The lawyer adjusted his glasses and placed the documents on Marco's bedside table. "Let's settle this at once." Marco glanced at Sophia before picking up the pen. "So these are the will papers?" "Yes," Olivia replied impatiently. "Everything we discussed. You just need to sign." Sophia tilted her head, feigning curiosity. "I imagine those documents specify who will inherit his fortune." Olivia narrowed her eyes. "This doesn't concern you." "Well, if he wants me to pretend to be his daughter, I guess that concerns me." The lawyer choked slightly, while Marco held back a smile. "Daughter?" Olivia let out a dry laugh. "Marco, you've got to be kidding." "I never joke about serious things," Marco replied, leaning back against the pillows. "That's absurd," Olivia snapped. "This girl showed up here yesterday and now she wants to pretend to be your daughter. If it were yesterday, I would have given you a headache before." Sophia smiled. Marco slid the papers aside. "If I have a daughter, then my will needs to be revised, right?" He looked at the lawyer. "Because, well, my daughter should be included in it." The lawyer cleared his throat. "Technically, yes. We would need to review the terms before proceeding with the signing." Olivia turned red with anger. "That's a ridiculous scam. Do you really think this girl could be your daughter?" "Maybe I will," Marco replied calmly. Sophia blinked in surprise. I expected him to say it was just a ploy to buy time, but Marco seemed genuine. "It won't stay like that," Olivia growled. "You can't just change everything." Marco smiled. "Actually, I can." Olivia left the room furious, dragging the lawyer with her. As soon as the door closed, Sophia turned to Marco. "Okay, it was fun to see her almost explode, but you weren't kidding, were you?" Marco sighed. "I'm not sure. I've wondered for years if I might have a lost daughter. I never looked into it because I thought it was too late." Sophia felt a chill run down her spine. "Do you think it could be me?" "It's a possibility." "Great. Another problem for my list of existential crises." Marco laughed, but then coughed hard. Sophia ran to get a glass of water and helped him drink it. "You need to rest. This whole mess can't be helping your health." "My health has been compromised for a long time." Marco looked at Sophia with a different sparkle in his eyes. "But I think having you around is making me want to fight more." Sophia looked away, uncomfortable with the intensity of the moment. "Well, if I really am your daughter, I guess that means I'll have to put up with you." "Glad to," Sophia snorted. "We'll see." That night, while Marco slept, Sophia went to the mansion's office. If there was any chance that this story was true, she needed to find proof. He began rummaging through drawers, pulling out old folders and yellowed files. That's when he found an unopened envelope with Marco's name scribbled on the front. He opened it carefully and felt his heart speed up. It was a DNA test, and the name on the document was hers. Sophia stood still for a moment, rereading the paper several times. Marco already knew. Before he could process everything, he heard footsteps outside. Olivia. Sophia quickly put away the papers and hid behind a bookshelf. Olivia entered the office and went straight to the desk, rummaging through drawers and muttering something to herself. "He can't find out. Not now." Sophia clenched her fists. Olivia knew something she was trying to hide. But now Sophia knew too. And he wasn't going to stop until he discovered the whole truth. The next day, Sophia entered Marco's room with the intention of confronting him. He was sitting on the bed, going through some papers when he noticed her expression. "Something wrong?" "Yes, you knew." Marco raised an eyebrow. "Knew what?" Sophia threw the envelope on the bed. "About me. About this." Marco took the papers with shaking hands. He took a deep breath before looking at Sophia. "I suspected it, but I didn't want to tell you without being sure." "Then why didn't you tell me anything?" "Because I didn't know how. Because if I was wrong, I didn't want to give you false hope." Sophia felt a lump in her throat. Part of her wanted to scream, part of her wanted to run. "I spent my whole life wondering if I had a family, and now I find out I had a father the whole time. I didn't know about you either, Sophia." Marco put the papers aside and looked deep into her eyes. "But now that I know, I don't want to waste any more time." She took a deep breath. "Me either." Before they could continue their conversation, they heard a noise in the hallway. Hurried steps. Then the door opened with force. Olivia was there, holding something in her hand. The will. And she didn't look happy. Olivia remained in the doorway, holding the will as if it were a weapon. His eyes were full of contained fury, and Sophia felt a shiver run down her spine. "Do you really think you can appear out of nowhere and change everything?" Olivia's voice was cool and controlled, but the grip on the papers in her hands revealed her anger. Marco leaned back against the pillows, watching Olivia with obvious tiredness. "Maybe because she has more of a right to it than you do." Olivia laughed, a short, dry sound. "Right? You're sick, Marco. Weak. And now you want to hand over everything you've built to this stranger." "My daughter," Marco corrected, his voice firm despite the low tone. Sophia felt her heart accelerate. Part of her was still processing this reality, but hearing Marco state it so clearly made something stir inside her. "This can't be right," Olivia continued, running a hand through her hair in a nervous gesture. "If it were true, if this girl was really your daughter, why didn't you look for her sooner?" "Because I didn't know." Marco looked directly at Sophia. "And now that I know, I want to do things right." "Right?" Olivia repeated mockingly. "You want to change everything based on a DNA test that might not even be true." Sophia crossed her arms, facing Olivia. "You seem pretty worried about that." "Of course I am," Olivia almost screamed. "You don't understand what's at stake here. You have no idea what it means to lose everything you've built." "You didn't build anything," Marco shot back. "You were just waiting for me to die so you could get your hands on everything." Olivia stood still for a moment, her expression wavering between shock and fury. "That's not true," she whispered. "No." Sophia took a step forward. "Then why are you trying to get rid of him so quickly? Why are you desperate for him to sign these papers?" Olivia's breathing became heavy, and Sophia saw desperation appear in her eyes. "This has gone too far." Olivia turned to Marco, completely ignoring Sophia. "You need to sign the will, Marco, now." "No," he replied simply. "March." "I said no." Olivia's hand shook as she held the documents. His face was red, his breathing short. "You don't understand," she murmured. "I did everything for us. This was all for both of us." Sophia frowned. "What are you talking about?" But Olivia didn't respond. Instead, he dropped the papers on Marco's bed and left the room, slamming the door. The silence that remained behind was heavy. Marco took the documents and leafed through them slowly. His face hardened as he read the clauses. "She wanted me to pass everything into her name before I died," he said, more to himself than to Sophia. "I knew she was up to something," Sophia replied, "but I didn't know it was that brazen." Marco sighed, closing his eyes for a moment. "I've been a fool for so long, but I've had enough now." Sophia felt a weight in her chest when she saw his tired expression. For the first time, he realized how fragile Marco really looked. "We need to get her out of here before she tries something worse," Sophia said. Marco nodded. "But we need to do this the right way." That night, Sophia couldn't sleep. He kept turning the information over in his head, trying to find a way to deal with Olivia without putting Marco at risk. But then he remembered something. He got up and went to the office again, rummaging through Marco's drawers until he found what he was looking for, a dossier of bank documents and medical records. When he read the details, his suspicions were confirmed. The next morning, he entered Marco's room with the papers in hand. "I know what Olivia is trying to hide." Marco looked up at her. She's been embezzling money from your account for months, and worse, she's tampering with your medications." Marco turned pale. "How are you sure?" Sophia handed him the documents. "I found all of this in your files. Olivia is trying to hasten your death." Marco took a deep breath, closing his eyes. "So, this is how it ends." "No," Sophia replied firmly. "This isn't over yet, and I know how to end it." Marco watched her for a moment before slowly nodding. "I'm listening." Sophia smiled, ready to give Olivia the last blow. Sophia walked down the hallway of the mansion with the documents firmly clutched in her hands. Her heart was beating fast, but she didn't hesitate. Olivia needed to be exposed, and Marco deserved justice. Upon entering his room, he found him sitting visibly weaker but determined. "Are you sure you want to do this now?" Marco asked, observing the firmness in Sophia's gaze. "If we wait any longer, she might try something else." Marco nodded and picked up the phone next to the bed. He dialed a number and waited. "Attorney?" He paused, listening to the response on the other end. "I want to review my will, now." Half an hour later, the lawyer arrived, followed by Olivia, who seemed irritated at being called so early. "This needs to be resolved soon, Marco," she said impatiently. "We don't have time for any more nonsense." "You're right," Marco replied. "That's why I called my lawyer. I'm going to make a change to the will." Olivia's eyes sparkled for a moment before she regained her composure. "You're finally seeing reason." "Yes," Marco said, taking the papers from Sophia's hand. "And my reason tells me I need to remove you from everything." Olivia's face froze. "What? Did you think I'd never find out?" Marco held up the documents. "Embezzlement of money, manipulation of my medications, attempt to force me to sign a fraudulent will." Olivia took a step back, but Sophia stepped forward. "You tried to kill him, Olivia." "This is nonsense," Olivia exploded. "Do you think anyone will believe that? I'm his wife." Marco looked at the lawyer. "If something happens to me, I want the police to have access to all these documents. Plus, I'm reporting Olivia right now." The lawyer signaled to one of the house's employees, who hurriedly left. "This can't be happening," Olivia mumbled, her voice trailing off. "Yes," Sophia replied, crossing her arms, "and I guarantee you won't get away with it." A few minutes later, 2 police officers entered the room. "Ms. Olivia, we have a warrant for your arrest for fraud and attempted murder." Olivia tried to protest, but the officers were already leading her out of the mansion. She took one last look at Marco. "You're going to regret this." Marco sighed and closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them again, he looked directly at Sophia. "It's okay now," he said with a small smile. Sophia felt a weight lifted from her shoulders. "Yes, it is." The days passed and the house began to look different, lighter. Marco, now receiving the correct treatments, slowly began to improve. Sophia visited him every day, and little by little she got used to the idea that she had finally found her family. The day Marco was finally able to leave his room and walk through the garden, Sophia was by his side. "So, daughter," he said, testing the word, "what do you plan to do now?" Sophia smiled. "I think I can finally think about the future." Marco held his hand and squeezed lightly. "Whatever that future is, I'll be here." Sophia looked at him and nodded. "For the first time in my life, I know that." And as they walked together through the garden, Sophia realized that, even after everything, she was no longer alone.